Welcome to the Sheroes of Beijing Stories, the podcast series, brought to you by UN Women Nigeria and Women in Successful Careers, WISCAR. In this series, we would be sharing and celebrating stories of women's activism in Nigeria. The women in this podcast were present in the Fourth World Conference on Women, popularly tagged Beijing 1995, and their extensive and impactful experience and commitment to the empowerment of women is why we continue to celebrate them. At WISCAR, we believe in the power of a shared story in leading the next generation to aspire, grow, and contribute to nation building. We hope you will be inspired as you listen. A warm welcome. In this episode, I will be in conversation with Dr. Timiebi Koripamo-Agary. Dr. Agary started her working career in the Old River State as a divisional agricultural officer and rose through the ranks to the position of permanent secretary in the Federal Civil Service in 2003. She retired in 2008 and is a respected mediator on labor and conflict issues, as well as a highly respected gender activist. She continues to work as a consultant and is active in industrial relations practice in both the public and private sectors. Dr. Agary earned a BSc from the University of Ibadan and an MSc from the University of London and another MSc from the Université Libre de Brussels. She earned her doctorate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and has several certifications from INSEAD and the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She has also received numerous awards and fellowships, including the national honor of the Officer of the Niger, OON. She is a proud Izon woman with very strong connections with her heritage, as she holds the chieftaincy title Azuzu 1 of Odi. Let's hear her speak. So we're in conversation with Timiebi Koripamo-Agary, and she is one of the contributors to the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, and we're very excited to have her on this podcast today, speaking all things women activism, women's rights, and moving the gender agenda forward. So, ma'am, in the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, you shared that you had had an experience with workplace gender-based harassment and assault. However, because you were aware of your rights, you took appropriate action. How should women in the workplace protect themselves from sexual harassment and assault today? And how can organizations like WISCAR support women in the workplace who are afraid of taking action or perhaps not even know their rights? You know, how can we help them get the support that they need from your experience?
Thank you very much. We have to make a distinction, though, because in the workplace, there are some women who don't mind. They place themselves to be abused, but they are very few and far between. Majority of women don't like to be harassed. And so the women must protect themselves against the workplace abuses and harassment by knowing what their rights are. They must, first and foremost, understand the terms and conditions of your employment. Know what you're entitled to and what you are not. It's very important. Secondly, be professional and do your work. Be diligent in your work and in your output so that nobody can use the quality of your work against you when they are indirectly sexually harassing you.
Right.
That's also very important. And then thirdly, I think generally women need to also understand what the terms and conditions of employment in any organization, they all have very clear terms and conditions of employment and the rules and regulations. In the public service, you have the public service rules. And, every employee really should be familiar with those terms and conditions and rules and regulations. And of course, for me, because I was very aware of my rights right from my student days at the university.
You were quite the activist.
Yes, I was. I actually found it very intolerable for men to be, I wouldn't say abusive. Well, they were. Some of them were verbally abusive. Some of them were intimidating, thinking that the women would probably succumb to...
back down, shy away.
Yes, shy away. So women must make up their mind to be strong. Don't ever cry in the presence of your tormentor. If you want to cry, go to the bathroom and cry. But don't ever cry in the presence of your tormentor. So this mindset, grounded by my parents really grounded my focus. The purpose of me getting education, my father was very clear about why you should remain focused and cut out distraction. And my mother, of course, was also a professional, and she was there guiding and supporting and advising, because I always went back to her and, we talked. I was friendly with everybody, but my allies in the workplace were men. As I was proceeding, as I was growing in the service. And so when it was time to fight, my allies in the workplace were the ones that were guiding me. They were editing my response to queries. They were editing my, because they knew what was going on. And they always know what goes on in the workplace with the men. So if you are allies with your colleagues and you relate well, they will always stand up for you. So I don't know whether I've answered the question, but these are the ways that, I managed to defend myself. But ultimately, I had to fall back on the law to challenge a man who was really, really, really assaulting my emotions and, verbally, and depriving me of my entitled benefits with respect to housing and other things because I was married. And in fact, that was the point I went to court. I took him on because the letter of appointment did not indicate that housing was provided for married people. There was no marital status attached to housing. It was a benefit for staff.
Right.
And his conclusion was, you are married, you should stay in your husband's house. I actually didn't need the house, but I actually wanted to make the point.
Yes.
I was entitled to it, and you better give me.
Wow.
He eventually gave it to me. I actually eventually got the flat. I never stayed there. I gave it to my cousins to stay. And when I made my point, I freed it up because I knew that there were people in my workplace that needed accommodation.
Yeah. That's really fantastic, Ma. That's a very strong point. And you mentioned two very strong things there, that I heard coming through. One was the importance of male allies. And the second one was actually about bullying in the workplace. I'll come back to you on the issue of male allies. I would love us to just unpack that a little bit more. But before that, let's talk about bullies. In the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, you mentioned a very interesting term called patriarchal bullies. And I'm very interested in exploring what that term means and how, the next generation of women in the workplace can actually handle these sorts of challenges and this coming into contact with patriarchal bullies.
Well, most often we associate bullying mostly to men. Patriarchy is about male dominance, male control. But you find that although women are usually victims of patriarchal bullying, there are many situations where women are also perpetrators in the workplace.
True.
Especially, big senior officers to junior female officers. They verbally abuse, they intimidate, sometimes, they get, physical and say, get out of my office and, stand up to want to, push somebody out. And these are things that are very inappropriate for anybody, much less women. And it should be avoided. The patriarchal bullies are everywhere. And, I had experienced quite a few of them. But what I did to get by was to try to make them my friends. I wasn't lobbying, but if I traveled, I would pick up a gift, a perfume or something, a scarf. And over time, it's smoothing the relationship with one or two of them that I had encountered in service. But there are patriarchal bullies who are women. And we must continually advocate that women must be very conscious of how they behave. They don't have to copy the administrative or the management style of the men. We are women. We are supposed to be more empathetic than men. And by the way, as a boss, I got on very well with my staff. And a lot of them will come, confiding in me and asking me for advice. I'm talking about the male, my male officers. And of course, I got on very well with the women because I was actually very conscious of the fact that I needed to treat everybody with respect,
decency, and
be even-handed in the way I took my decisions, not to hurt. There was a lot of humanity. I mean, having been raised in a Christian home, you had also some of these spiritual guidance that also impacted on the way I related with people. But it's very, very important that to avoid patriarchal
bullying,
yes, in the workplace, especially by women. Men, we know. You do everything you can to avoid confrontation with men. But for the women, female bosses should show some empathy to women. Because, we have a lot of challenges. We come in the morning, our child is sick, we've just gone to the hospital. So there are issues that some women have. Some women abuse it. But there are real reasons why sometimes women are not up to par. And we must show sympathy and stop being abusive. Because there are challenges that we may not know at home. And we must always be there, open and willing to listen if they want to confide in you. And also show a willingness and openness to engage if you see an officer that is a little troubled. Those are the things that would help women. And it's only women, as we advocate for opening up of spaces as in the hierarchy, in governance, in business, in
across all echelons of work, yes.
Yeah, we must also begin to show a different perspective to management and administration as women, to build peace in the workplace and happiness for people to come back to work, to be productive. Because you need productivity. Unhappy workforce can never be productive. That's why I am always very upset when there are strikes. And I always advocate for employers to engage workers to try to meet them halfway, to make them happy. Unhappy people can never be productive. But these are all issues that I believe that we must engage in.
That's really poignant, I have to say. I like the point you make about, again, we talk about, male allyship and bringing them around, but also emphasizing the point that, this thing of patriarchal bullies is not necessarily limited in any way, shape or form to men. This is something that women also engage in. And the fact that as we make and advocate for more women to sort of take up, the mantles of leadership and bring other women along, we've got to do it with our own style. We don't need to adopt that management style that is essentially traditionally male or traditionally sort of patriarchal. We can bring our unique styles that are common to women in terms of empathy, in terms of consensus building, in terms of willingness to engage and bringing those styles on board as we obviously discountenance the idea of bullying and harassment in the workplace. So thank you very much for that. We'll be going on a very short break soon, just to catch our breath and we come back. But before that, I'd like, again, just to go back to the book and just to sort of wrap up on these points that we've been talking about women in the workplace and the importance of allyship. Even in the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, you conveyed that women in Nigeria, WIN, which was one of the foremost women's organizations at the time, had male members. And, it was your opinion that, in fact, having those male members contributed in some ways to some of the successes that the organization is known to have made. And what this tells us is that definitely there is a case for he, for she. In order for us to really actualize the idea of true gender equity, we must have he for she's. And we've spoken about that in some of the points we've already raised. So just before we go on break, I want to ask, what steps do you think we should take as a society to foster the disposition of equality and bring more men on board as allies? Because obviously that really is the way of moving forward. How do we bring more men on board this conversation of gender equality?
I'm one of those that sometimes I don't like some of these terms. Equality.
Take us there.
I think I like the term equity. Equality, I'm not very sure that maybe identical twins, they may be equal in their genetic makeup. But I like the term, equity, justice. Some of the words, some of the postures that women adopt tend to put men on the defensive. I told you I'm very good friends with men. They tend to put men on the defensive. But I think you can get a lot of men to work with them. Especially, there are a lot of good men. Most men that I know growing up were raised by their mothers. So innately, they have this sympathy, this bias towards women. But when you now ring this bell of equality, it tends to put them off because we are still a patriarchal society. It's not even just Nigeria. Even in the developed world, the men are still resisting this whole notion of gender equality. So we must come up with a different, non-threatening language, collaboration, cooperation, and of course, also work hard whenever we find ourselves, wherever we find ourselves, to also create the spaces for women. The responsibility can't be only for the men to give us a chance. A lot of women find themselves in position, and in fact, like I said, they climb up the ladder and they knock the ladder down so that other women can move. So this whole equality thing is not just a problem for men. Yes, men are controlling the political space where critical decisions are taken. But when women are given the opportunity to help to expand the very small space that they occupy, that they can expand, a lot of women don't do it. So we must work collaboratively. Women in Nigeria, they were really, let me put it this way, they were mostly academic, very exposed group. And so the men had an understanding. A lot of the men were really very gender activists, very gender sensitive, and so women. And we made a lot of progress because they carried out a lot of research on the issues and concerns of women. And the Beijing document, because they had done a lot of research, collaborative research with the men in all the sectors of Nigeria's life, economy, social. When it was time to write the Beijing document, when I wrote the Beijing document, they had a lot of statistics they had collected. And that helped to at least create some kind of a baseline for our country paper,
Okay.
That I hope that has been built, that over the years they have built on that baseline.
Fantastic, Ma. So I hear you say it's obviously important, and you use the words collaboration, cooperation, in terms of, moving that conversation of bringing more men on board, this move for gender equity. I think there are people who would take you up on the word equality as well, that say it's just as relevant. Equity is about fairness and justice, just like you said, but equality is even understanding that there must be a level playing field. But I hear you that in the patriarchal society that we are in, we have to begin to sort of have these conversations from a halfway point of view, and then we'll get there. So I'll leave that for others to take up that conversation, but very interesting points. And also, yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Go ahead. No, it's okay. I am very, very conscious of my rights as a woman, but I also know that you have to be very tactful.
Yes.
To get your leg in the crack at the door.
Yes.
And then push the door open. If you are not subtle, no man will give you any space or equality. We are finding out in Nigeria today. We'll get to that.
Absolutely. And definitely very important is the fact that when we do get ourselves, we've put that one leg through the crack. We must not throw the ladder back down, as you said. We must keep the ladder up for other women to come along. Thank you so much, ma'am. We're just going to take a short break to learn a bit more about the Beijing principles and the critical areas of concern. And we'll be right back.
The 1995 Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action flagged 12 key areas where urgent action was needed to ensure greater equality and opportunities for women and men, girls and boys. It also laid out concrete ways for countries to bring about change. UN Women works with governments and partners to ensure such change is real for women and girls around the world. Critical area of concern number 4. Violence against women. Violence hurts women and girls and hampers their ability to thrive in multiple ways. Since the Beijing conference, an historic 2/3 of countries have put laws on the books to stop domestic violence. Yet, gaps in laws, implementation of legal protection, and lack of access to essential services remain for women globally. Ending violence against women is one of UN Women's key priorities. We support expanding access to quality, multi-sectoral responses for survivors, covering safety, shelter, health, justice, and other essential services. We advocate for laws and help guide policies and action plans to help step up investments in prevention, the most cost-effective, long-term means to stop violence against women by addressing its root causes.
Hello again. We're back in conversation with Timiebi Koripamo-Agary. And we've been having conversations around, topics discussed in the book, The Sheroes of Beijing. And we're just going to dive right back to it. So welcome back, ma'am.
Thank you.
So it's 25 years post the Beijing conference, as you know, and the demands for gender equality and equity evolve each day. Some gains have definitely been made, and in other ways, we have regressed. And I think last year with the COVID-19 pandemic sort of really, amplified some of that regression. But I want you to just share what you feel are some of the major gains that we have achieved, over the last 25 years. Obviously, work had been done even before Beijing. But focusing specifically, because my understanding is that Beijing was really a pivotal shift in terms of the understanding of women's rights as human rights. So how, in your opinion, would you say have been the gains that we have made? And then going forward, looking forward to the next 10 years, which the UN Women, our partners in this podcast, have termed the decade of action. What are some of the things that we can do to really then move the needle so that we're not having these same conversations in 10 years?
In the last 25 years, yes, we've made some gains, Women have been visible in governance in Nigeria, especially during the civilian era. They've been given some very good portfolios, finance, petroleum. More women have really occupied the executive office of as ministers. And, in the public service, we have done very well. We've had female heads of service, permanent secretaries. We've really done very well in the formal sector. Politically, while we had some gains post-Beijing, post-1995, especially between 1999 and 1993, we seem to be losing ground in the political space. And that gives me a lot of cause for concern, because it's in politics that policies are formulated, and decisions affecting our lives are made.
Yes.
The National Assembly, where it functions well. And we have very few voices right now. And I think that we have to continually advocate and create awareness. And in the next 10 years, moving forward, we have to focus on peace-building effort. The violence in the country right now is affecting the children of the future. Schools are shutting down in some communities. Young people are being abused and killed. So in the next 10 years, we must focus on peace and security so that our children can grow up and thrive in a peaceful environment, because they are the leaders of tomorrow. You go and kidnap children from secondary schools. What future would Nigeria have if, we don't equip these children with adequate education and professional training to take over? So there are great challenges for us. We must focus on peace and security and education of our children, not just the girl child. All children must be given equal opportunities, because that is where the equality will start.
Yes.
When we start from education, giving children the same opportunities to acquire education, to acquire training, professional training, whatever training, then we are preparing them to be competitive with one another. And then the demands can be made for equal treatment, because everybody has been
set off on an equal level playing field.
On an equal footing. So
Yes.
that's very important. In politics, Nigerian women, I think we need to adopt a different strategy, because I know that proposals are being made to amend the Constitution, and I don't know, whether that will work. I personally don't believe in amending constitutions to give women positions in governance. Elections, in a democracy, elections are won. I think the political parties should be the ones that we should put pressure on to create avenues and opportunities for women to compete. Because in a free and fair election in Nigeria today, I know that a lot of women will win election, but there is so much violence, so much intimidation, so much abuse that a lot of women just don't show any interest.
Yes. They're put off
in the fray. They're put off. But if we improve the political environment devoid of money, devoid of violence, just competence in terms of delivery of the needs of the people at the grassroots in urban areas, I think women will do very well. So my hope for the next 10 years is that first we must have peace, because there can be no development without peace. There has to be peace and security in Nigeria for everybody, irrespective of your religion. There has to be peace and security for women to effectively participate in all spheres of life. But there must be focus on quality education from primary all the way to post-primary for all those who are willing to go beyond and acquire higher education. There has to be equal opportunity for them. Access to health care for women, so that women die from preventable diseases. A childbirth, fewer children die from preventable childhood diseases, we must begin to provide those services. And those of us who are in those sectors that can contribute to making those changes must begin to engage the processes at whatever level, at the local government, states, to create this enabling environment for the future, not just for women, but for Nigeria. Because without this, there can be no future for the country. Because a country is measured by the quality of its human
capacity.
Resources.
Yes.
Human capacity, human resources. And it's very important. Even the United States, I'm sure if you listen to CNN, the president's speech has refocused on children, preschool education, community college for those who don't have the capacity to go to university, but technical. And that's something that we also must begin to refocus. Maybe we don't need that many graduates.
All from universities, having university degrees.
We need more technical, hands-on people, because it's very important for us to have a mix. But education, I think, is the key. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Education, healthcare, peace and security, and women's political participation, particularly through the mechanism of the political parties, are key focus areas over the next 10 years. And we have all heard it. And I hope we will all, who are listening, put this into action. And so as we round up, Ma, and I have to say what a privilege it's been to have you in conversation with me. I've been very excited about this. I knew that it would be engaging and there would be lots and lots to share. And unfortunately, we're limited by the time that we have. So just in terms of a final question, you expressed that one of the memories that stuck with you, I'm taking you back to the Beijing conference now. You expressed that one of the memories that stuck with you from that conference was the sheer number of women from different nations, colors, cultural identities, religious backgrounds coming together to discuss, the same issues and concerns, which was the concern of women's rights. In closing, what can you share a few words? Again, I know you've spoken to this already, but just to emphasize the importance of women supporting each other, the power of sisterhood, and the need for collective action if we're to truly move the agenda forward, and if we're to truly, action these things that you've spoken of just in this previous question, over the next 10 years. What is that role of women's sisterhood and solidarity as we close?
It's very important. Sisterhood, women's solidarity is very important. Basically, we have the same experiences: sexual abuse, violence in the home, domestic violence, stress, mental issues. So it's very important that there is some solidarity. Women build solidarity to support one another, to give voice to their issues. Because if you don't speak up and speak out, the government or policymakers will not know what's going on with a lot of women. It's because of this sisterhood and this women's movement and women's actions of speaking out and drawing attention to the problems of women. And I must say, I need to go back and put it on record that Miriam Babangida and her Better Life for Women program really galvanized and showed me the importance of a strong women's sisterhood, because she built this sisterhood from the community level and used community-based women's organizations that built up all the way to the National Council for Women's Societies, which was the predominant body that I considered as sisterhood for women. But there are also professional bodies for women now, FIDA, medical women, women engineers. It's very important because these sisterhoods would help raise the voice to support the issues of women. I know they volunteer sometimes to help themselves, women. Of course, I also know I belong to quite a few. I try to mentor, which is one of the reasons why I was very happy with WISCAR and this your mentorship program. These women groups reach out and mentor young people and advise, engage. And it's very important that we never break that link between the generations, that we must keep dragging, must keep reaching down to bring up the young ones, and as we climb up, keep pulling them up with us. And of course, we don't forget the older women who have charted the course, opened the pathway for us to be where we are, and learn from their successes to apply to this sisterhood that we must build, because it's a place of healing for a lot of women. It's a place of friendship. It's a place of support. Some groups are also there to help women undergoing so much domestic crisis. So the women's sisterhood should be encouraged at all levels amongst all adult females, because it's a very strong point, because there's always opportunity to give voice to the issues that affect women, and to amplify those concerns, as more women join the process. And it's a very good thing to support. And I hope that WISCAR, that started it, will also create opportunities for middle-level workers. Because like I said, some women are not very good at relating with other women, and they may not be aware. I was very fortunate. I had very good bosses, women, very professional. They did their work, and I really loved them because I learned so much from them. And until Mrs. Francesca Emmanuel died, I was in very close contact with her because she was one of my bosses that I really loved, her working style and her relationship with her staff and women. I had other women too. Ambassador Judy Tata was also a PAMSE, very professional, very easygoing, easy to approach. So, we must use these sisterhood alliances to support one another, and it's my hope that WISCAR would support the process by engaging professional women's bodies to also sensitize them to the need for not only focusing on their professional concerns, but on other social issues, feeder, medical, for them to give voice to the challenges of women, because these are all sisterhood bodies that can support and advance the cause of women in Nigeria.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ma. I've come through a 30 or 40-minute masterclass with you this afternoon, and these conversations that we have had is everything that I hoped that it would be. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here. We've talked about sisterhood and solidarity, the space that it creates for mentorship, for healing, for friendship, for support, for giving voice. And you've said that it should be encouraged at all levels. And I hope that, everyone who's listening today will take all these learnings and all these points on board, that there is power in the solidarity of women. And we've had conversations with other mentors who have been on this podcast series who've talked about, the pull her down syndrome and, not every woman necessarily supporting women, but that this is definitely a path and a cause that we should sort of focus and channel our energies towards if we're really to move the gender agenda conversation forward. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon on this podcast. Madam Timiebi Koripamo-Agary, my adopted auntie from the South.
Thank you. Thank you, my dear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for making the time. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sheroes of Beijing podcast series. For more insights, follow us up across our social media handles. Follow UN Women on Twitter at UN Women Nigeria. Follow WISCAR on Instagram at WISCARNG and WISCAR Nigeria on Facebook and LinkedIn, or at Africa Business Radio.